Alrighty, welcome back everyone, it's Garland here bringing you another Neverwinter video, and today we are going to finally release the Mod 13 Temptation Guide and Build. Now as always, full disclaimer, this is only a guide that I am currently using in in-game content. You should take this and cater it to your own needs, play around with things, and just use this as a template. You know, I try to say that in every video, but it is what it is. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this. I want to start this video off by saying that I am not a fan, of course, of Temptation. I play a Warlock for DPS. However, the current, meta has changed. The meta has changed. There's nothing we can do about that. So you have to adapt and learn and just broaden your horizons, I guess. So yes, I am playing Temptation in endgame content. I don't want to jeopardize by switching to DPS. Now, DPS did get an increase in Mod 13, however, it's not significant enough to still compete with the other classes. Now, this is a work in progress. I hope Cryptic gives the Warlock more love down the road, but I feel that it's not going to happen for a while, guys. It really isn't. The Warlock is just in complete, distress right now. Granted, even if you run DPS, chances are you're going to be fine. What's the difference if you run a 20-minute Tomb of the Nine Gods versus a 15-minute? It's not that big of a deal. You're still going to be relevant. You're still going to be fine. However, now, as far as endgame content, people are going to expect you to run Temptation, and that's all due to the new capstone debuff of 20% with your Warlock's Curse. So, like I said, it's up to you if you want to stay true to your roots and be DPS, or if you want to try Temptation, or you're already playing Temptation and you actually like Temptation. That's completely up to you and your playstyle. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this shit show. Let's go ahead and start off with the attributes, which have been the same since the dawn of time for the most part. You're going to roll Constitution, Charisma. Now, I'm still running Human, of course. However, you still can run whatever you want at this point. If you want to run Dragonborn or if you want to run Tiefling, that's completely up to you. I would like to also state that, as playing a Templock, you need to learn your role as a Templock as well. And what do I mean by this? You're simply going to be pressing one button. They have made Temptation all about the capstone and the debuff that it provides. None of your statistics honestly matter. That's going to piss off a lot of people when I say that, but unfortunately that's the sad truth of the thing. All that matters is the capstone, guys. It doesn't matter what your statistics are. It doesn't matter what your gear score is. Your power, yes, you want to focus on your power. Your crit, it doesn't matter. Your crit is irrelevant at this point. You can have 2,000 crit, and as long as you're casting Warlock's Curse, you're going to provide that debuff, and your team is going to slaughter everything. The same thing with your armor penetration. You don't even need armor penetration. You can have this at 1,000. It's not going to matter. Your role as Temptation is not DPS. It is not healing. Once again, that's going to piss off a lot of people. People play Temptation because they like the healing aspect of it. They like their name on the healing charts at the end of the dungeon. Healing is irrelevant in Neverwinter, and it always has been. People are self-healing themselves with life still. Healing is irrelevant in Neverwinter, especially in endgame content. In Cradle of the Death God, for instance, even if you're the best Templock on the server, in the game, it doesn't matter what kind of healing you're going to provide. You're going to get one shot in there no matter what. So healing is completely irrelevant, and I know a lot of people don't like me saying that, but like I said, that's the truth of the matter. None of your statistics matter at this point. All you have to do is cast Warlock's Curse, and that's it. That is Temptation in a nutshell. Now, there's going to be other things with Temptation that, yes, you can provide more support than just Warlock's Curse, but we'll get into that when we jump into the build side of this guide. So when we're talking about statistics here, like I said, they don't matter to a degree. Now, if you're playing a Templock seriously, at least more seriously than I'm playing it, then you're going to want to prioritize your power followed by your recovery. You want to shoot from anywhere from 20,000 recovery, 30,000 recovery. If you can push upwards of 40,000 recovery, then that's fine. You're going to be able to spam your encounter powers, thus providing more debuffs, as well as spamming your dailies. But keep in mind, as I said, you are not a damage dealer. All you want to be doing is casting your Warlock's Curse, which has no cooldown. You can simply sit there and spam cast it over and over again, non-stop. So your statistics don't really matter. However, if you do want to take it seriously, you want to take it a little more seriously, especially more than I am, as I stated, you do want to maximize your power followed by your recovery. Then if you want to work on crit strike and armor pen so you are actually doing some extra damage, then that's fine. But like I said, keep in mind your damage is irrelevant at this point. You are not DPS. Let's go ahead and jump into the gear. Now, like I said, if you're taking it seriously, which I am not going to take the time to switch all this gear around, but I do have some of the gear that I can show you guys of what you probably should run as Temptation if you're going to take it seriously. And we're going to start with the Hunter's Caliph, which has recovery on it. It has over 2,100 recovery for your headpiece. You're going to want the Royal Silk, again, with recovery on it. The Bone Spurs is going to be recovery on it again. And then you're going to want to run one piece Primal, which is going to be the Raid chest piece, which is going to be power recovery. Now, you can run other pieces. Like I said, you would like to ideally find something with power recovery on it. However, there aren't many options out there. So if you were going to capitalize solely on recovery, this is the setup that you're going to be looking at, with the Caliph, the Royal Silk, the Bone Spurs, and then one piece of Primal, which is going to be the chest piece. Now, I will leave the option up to you as far as reinforcement goes on these four pieces. You can either take it even further and roll recovery reinforcements, or you can roll power reinforcements. That is going to be completely up to the player. As far as your weapons go, you're going to want to get the new Primal set. I'm currently working on it. I have the Primal weapon. I'm working on the offhand now. What I'm currently using is just an old school Mirage set. If we go ahead and look at the artifact powers on this, I'm using Hand of Blight for the additional debuff. And then on the offhand, we're using Flames of Empowerment, because unfortunately there's not just really many options out there. If you really want to switch to No Pity, No Mercy for the 5% duration of its effect, which is a debuff on No Pity, No Mercy, that's up to you. I would stick with Flames of Empowerment since it was finally fixed and it's now working on the offhand for additional damage. But keep in mind, as I said, damage is not your goal. As far as your armor enchantment goes, it's up to you. If you want to use a Bark Shield, that's completely fine, which is what I'm using right now. If you want to use a negation, it's completely up to you. If you want to use a soul, then that's fine. If you want that extra res in case you go down, but keep in mind in Cradle of the Death God, with the pull-push mechanism, the soul isn't going to save you because you're going to fall off and you're going to die anyway. As well as the rest of your gear, you can still run the Orcus set. The 3-piece Orcus is completely fine. Your rings are going to be completely up to you. You can run any of the new stuff, the Shadow Striker, the Grave Striker, the Epic version, the Ring of Offensive. That's completely up to you. Like I said, those are all DPS options that are secondary to your main objective. So that's why the gear just doesn't really matter, guys. You can run basically whatever you want, and it's not going to matter on Temptation. As far as your enchantments go, I would recommend Black Ice. in your offensive and your defensive slots. So you're looking at, you know, all solid black ice everywhere. Your shirt and pants, you want to get the new set, the primal pants and the primal shirt. I currently only have the shirt, but you want to go ahead and get both of them, the primal shirt and pants. Now your artifacts, it's the same thing. You would like to ideally go with anything with power recovery on it. So Sigil of the Hunter is a good one. Symbol of the Air, which most DCs use as power recovery, you probably want to use that as well. Anything with power recovery on it is going to be a valid option as far as your artifacts go. But that's pretty much going to wrap up the gear, guys. As far as your main active, I use Sigil of the Devoted, just because that's what I use on my DPS build. However, you know, you can use whatever you want here as well. Any kind of support artifact that's going to help the team, you can use it as your active artifact as well. I just simply use the Sigil so I can double pop dailies and, you know, no big deal. But once again, I cannot stress, remember, you are not DPS. Your DPS is irrelevant. You know, that is not why you're there. That is not your objective anymore. Your objective is to be a soul debuffer. So like I said, guys, that is going to wrap up the gear. If you have any questions with the gear itself, like I said, you can pretty much run anything. I'm running my DPS gear, and there's no different. If you want to take it a lot more serious than I take Temptation, then like I said, you can go ahead and run recovery, and you should be fine. If you can get your recovery anywhere upwards of 20k, 30k, 40k, you're going to be able to spam your encounter powers at that point, thus leading to more debuffs from the encounter powers themselves. So that is going to wrap up the gear section. I think we did cover everything. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. I did actually forget. Let's go over the weapon enchantment. I'm currently using a Fade Touch, which is pretty much best in slot at this point for everything. DPS, Temptation, whatever. You can run whatever you want here, though. You can run a Plague Fire here. You can run a Frost here. It's up to you. You can run a Dread here if you really want. That's completely up to you. I am going with my Fade Touch just because that's what I have. And we all know that making rank 14s is not an easy task. So I personally am not re-rolling all Black Ice rank 14s when I have, you know, my current DPS setup with all my enchantments. I'm not going to go through that again. So rank 14s are not easy. And you can play Temptation very easily because all you need is the capstone. So that's going to wrap up the gear. We'll go ahead and run, we'll go right into the build itself next, guys. Alright guys, so here is the official Mod 13 Temptation build. I've been theory crafting, talking to other Warlocks. We've been working on this for months in advance. You know, PC has already had Mod 13 for some time, and we were already working on this before PC actually got the Mod 13 update. So I already knew what we were going to do once it finally launched on console. This is basically the ideal setup as far as Temptation goes. So if you want to take a look at this, pause the video. We will go over this more in depth. You can make some adjustments to it if you want. Like I said, this guide is just a guideline. I would like you guys to test your own theories, and maybe you can come up with something better. But this is pretty much going to be the go-to Temptation loadout and build. Keep in mind, I am a human still, so I do get those 3 extra points. So you're going to take 3 out of 3 in toughness just for the 9% additional HP. We're going to take 4 out of 5 for the AP gain. We're going to totally disregard the crit because, like I said, you're playing Temptation. You don't even have to worry about crit anymore. You're going to take 3 out of 3 for Empowered Rituals, giving your encounter powers more damage. Yippee skippy, I guess. We're going to take 5 out of 5 for Determined Casting, which is going to, you know, be 10% cooldown reduction. We're going to take the 3 out of 3 for Lifesteal, because your Temptation and your Revelry procs off, you know, every time you Lifesteal, so the extra 3%, sure, why not? And then for me, since I'm a human, I took 5 out of 5 for Blood Pack. If you're a Tiefling or Dragonborn and you're not going to have the additional bonus points, you can simply take 2 out of 5. Or if you really want, you can put, you know, those extra 2 in crit, or, you know, max out the 5. Whatever you want to do. If you want to put those extra into crit, severity, that's up to you. I just went ahead and you know, put the 5 out of 5 in Blood Pack. Now moving to the build itself, we're going to take 5 out of 5 for Hope Stiller. Obviously, your lifesteal chance and your lifesteal severity. Then we're going to take the Hellish for your Hellish Rebuke. Targets affected by the Rebuke, they're going to deal 5% less damage. Remember, Temptation is all about debuffing. Of course, we're going to take Dark Revelry. I really wish Dark Revelry would have got a bigger, you know, a boost. You know, the Dark Revelry is not good at all, to be honest. It's only 20% of your base power. So let's say you're sitting at 40,000 base power. 20% of that's only around, what, 7k, 8k, 8,000 power that you're providing to your team. I feel that should be buffed quite significantly, considering the, you know, DCs and Paladins, they can buff a lot. So 20% of your base power, I feel, is a little low. Dark Revelry's been like that for a long time now. I would have liked to see it gotten, you know, a increase or a raise, but it didn't. So it is what it is. I mean, at least you're providing some kind of power to the team. 8,000 doesn't seem like a lot, you know, it really isn't in retrospect. You know, when we're buffing over to 200,000 power, 250,000 power in a full buff group, upwards of 300,000 power. When you're only providing 8,000, yeah, it's kind of insignificant, unfortunately. Aura of Cruelty is going to be you, yourself, and all your teammates within 50 of you gain 5% lifesteal chance and 10% severity. So you're going to provide more lifesteal to your teammates. We're going to take 5 out of 5 for Despair as well. Enemies within 50 of you are going to deal 5% less damage and take 5% increased damage. So this is your first actual debuff. 5% increased damage just on Despair alone. Now we're going to skip Momentum and Darkness. We're going to skip Darkness because Blades of the Vanquished armies you're not going to use. Horror Storm also not going to use. And when using these, it states that enemies are going to deal 10% less damage and take 10% more damage from you for 6 seconds. Remember, you don't matter. Your DPS does not matter. This is not going to affect your group. That's a lot of confusion about this. This only affects you, unfortunately, not your teammates. That's why we're skipping this. Momentum we're skipping because it's stamina. The only good thing from this is combat advantage, but you don't really need combat advantage, so we're going to skip it. And then finally, we're going to hit the Big Daddy. This is all of Mod 13 right here in a nutshell. Is going to be Soul Bonding. They changed it where the very bottom line, allies now deal 20% increased damage to enemies affected by your Warlock's Curse. You're simply going to sit there, spam Warlock's Curse, and everyone's going to do 20% more damage. It's a 20% debuff. So that's Temptation in a nutshell. Now the rest of the points, the rest of the 15 points, we're actually going to come up on top. We're going to take Critical Promise, which isn't a big deal. It's just DPS. Not a big deal. Your objective is not DPS. We're going to take Gatekeepers. Your Hellish Rebuke, the DOT, is going to do more damage. Again, you're not here for damage. We're coming up here so we can take the third one. So we can take Infernal Wrath. Your Lesser Curse also causes the target to have 5% damage resistance. So you're going to get 5% from Internal Wrath. You're going to get 5% from Despair. And you're going to get 20% from the Capstone. These all stack. it's going to equal to a 30% overall debuff just from the feats. I'll leave this screen up for another few seconds, and then we're actually going to move on to the powers. Alright guys, we're here on the powers. Let's go ahead and start with the dailies. We are still going to use Brood of Hadar, as well as Tyrannical. Just spam Brood of Hadar pretty much. Whenever you have the daily up, you know, just go ahead and spam Brood of Hadar. Now as far as your personals go, you can use Shadow Walk. That's completely up to you for your run speed, deflect, as well as lifesteal. You're going to use Flames of Empowerment. And then you can use ACC. That way, when you are crit striking and you're applying the Lesser Curse, then your Infernal Wrath kicks in and bada bing, bada boom. Keep in mind, though, that Pillar of Power, for whatever reason, is actually proccing Lesser Curse, even if you don't have ACC equipped. So you don't really need ACC. You can change it to whatever you actually want, as long as you're using your Pillar of Power. Then you're good to go, because for whatever reason it's actually proccing Lesser Curse. Now as far as your encounters go, we're going to use Hadar's Grasp. You know, it does provide additional debuff. 15% more damage. So you want to use this. That's why if you want to maximize on your cooldowns, that way it won't have as long as a cooldown. Of course, you're going to be using your Pillar of Power. That way you want to cast this under the boss or under mobs, as well as under your teammates. We all know what Pillar of Power does. I shouldn't have to explain it. You know, it provides a damage buff as well as damage resistance, and it's just sexy. Pillar of Power is sexy. Pillar of Power now also crits, so it's actually pretty good. Finally, we're going to use Dread Theft. Dread Theft is just a powerhouse right now, and it also provides a additional debuff. So you're all about debuffing. That's all your main objective is debuffing. The only downfall of Dread Theft is you can't cast anything while you're casting Dread Theft. I mean, yes, you can cast them at wills, but that's not working as intended. That shouldn't be happening. So Dread Theft, while you're actually using it, you're going to be standing there not being able to do anything else. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your rotation. I always like to go Pillar of Power, Hadar's, then Dread Theft. By the time Dread Theft's coming off of its cycle, you should be able to reapply Pillar, then Hadar's again, Dread Theft. Rinse and repeat. Spam your Warlock's Curse in between, making sure that that debuff is active at all times. That's going to wrap it up for the powers. You can basically use whatever you want, but I would mainly stick to those three in particular just for the additional debuffs. As far as your at-wills go, we use Hand of Blight for the additional debuff on Hand of Blight, and then Hellish Rebuke, of course, as your main one. But unfortunately, I don't really have that much time to get off that many at-wills, as I have an endless cycle of encounter powers that are debuffing. So when I can cast a Hellish Rebuke or a Hand of Blight, go for it. But like I said, you want to mainly stick to those things that are going to debuff. So that's going to wrap it up to the powers. Let's go ahead and move on to the mounts next. Alright, so here we are on the mount screen. Right off the bat, if you're lucky enough to have, you know, the legendary T-Rex, that's what you're going to want to go with for that additional, again, debuff on the T-Rex. You can't really go wrong with it. If you're lucky enough to have two legendary mounts and you have the Tensors, then yes, you can use the Tensors equip power to further boost your recovery. However, if you want to stack more power, that's completely up to you. I prefer the recovery over power because, once again, the power share on Templock isn't really that good, to be honest. But if you want that little boost, that little edge, then you can switch this for power instead of recovery. That's personal preference for the player. Moving on into the stable, nothing has really changed here. These are pretty much the basic mount powers that we've been using for, you know, a long time here. Protector's Camaraderie, Cavalry's Warning, Shepherd's Devotion, Artificer's Persuasion, Assassin's Covenant. Unfortunately, they're not coming out with many new mount bonuses, so this is what we're just using, unfortunately. You know, these could be better. I wish there were better ones available. For instance, Assassin's Covenant, you know, you don't really get that big of an increase from Assassin's Covenant. You know, it's a little power boost, but it's so insignificant that it doesn't matter. You can run something completely else if you want. So, mounts, that's completely up to the player as well. As far as your insignias themselves, you should probably split between Dominance and Mastery. Dominance for the additional power, and then Mastery for the additional recovery. That's going to wrap it up pretty much for the mounts. Let's move on to the companions. Alright guys, as far as the companions go, if you want to buy the new Shulton Tiger, it's obviously going to be best in slot for DPS classes. If you want to continue to use your Con Artist, Rebel Mercenary, or Sellsword, then that's completely fine as well. It's personal choice, personal preference. Me, for instance, I do have the Shulton Tiger. You, of course, want to rock the Bonding Stones, and then ideally, whatever you want. You know, you could put new rings on here if you can get a hold of the new rings, especially the Grave Striker, as those do proc with the companion for the extra power. So that's a huge bonus right there. I'm still using Illusionist Gambit. I haven't gotten any of the new rings. You know, we're still pretty early as far as Mod 13 goes. But if you do get any of the new rings, you can put those on here. And then as far as your offensive slots, it's completely up to you. If you want to stack Black Ice in here as well, if you want to stack Silveries in here, or Radiance, whatever you want to stack. You want to focus on power, you want to focus on recovery, you want to focus on all three. So Black Ice, Radiance, Silveries, whatever you guys want to put in here as your bonding proc, that's up to you. As far as the other actives go, we are still using a Siege Master, Earth Archon, Air Archon, and you bet your sweet ass I still got a Belial on here. Now you guys can change this however you see fit. If you want to rock the new companion, the Alpha Compy, by all means go for it. You don't need this 10% crit severity on especially Temptation. So if you want to get the new Alpha Company, the Alpha Compy, which is going to be 5% more damage in Shult, that's completely up to you. If you want to go ahead and rock a Fire Archon, then, you know, you can go ahead and put your Fire Archon there. So the companions, pretty much standard throughout time, not very many changes. That's going to wrap it up for the companions. Let's finally move on to the boons and then wrap up the video. Alright guys, and finally here we are on the boons. I'm not going to go into too much detail with the boons. If you want to pause the video as I scroll through them, then by all means. I did make slight adjustments for Temptation other than my DPS builds, but we're not going to go into detail with these. So starting off, guild. If you're in a guild, you're in a maxed out guild, obviously you're going to use power and then life still. You can switch to the HP if you really want to. I would recommend you stay with the life still. Sharandar. Dreadring. Icewind Dale. Underdark. Tyranny of Dragons. The Maze Engine. Elemental Evil. Storm King's Thunder. The Cloaked Ascendancy. And then finally we have the Jungles of Shult. With mod 13, I'm going to probably put the extra 3 points into defense, and then we'll just stack the last point, get 2 out of 2 for Lingering Curse. Not very many options as far as the module goes. So we'll probably, like I said, just put the last 3 points right here in defense. That's it, guys. That's going to wrap up this video. Hopefully you enjoyed the Temptation guide and build. If you do have any questions, as always, please leave a comment below. I'm sure I've angered a lot of people, but you know what? I mean, the truth hurts. If you guys are angry at anyone, don't be angry at me. Express your feelings toward Cryptic, you know? They've essentially taken a DPS class and forced 90% of the people to switch to a support role, especially in endgame. You're going to have those Warlocks that still are going to, you know, play DPS, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The DPS numbers, like I said, aren't horrible, but you still can't compete with a DPS Guardian fighter. You still can't compete with a Hunter Ranger. I've given some great weapon fighters some run for their money, but, you know, that's a different story, too. Don't be mad at me, guys. Don't be mad at me. Be mad at Cryptic. I have nothing to do with this. I, myself, have to change my whole playstyle, especially in endgame content. I've run Cradle of the Death God now a handful of times. And you have to be Temptation. Those debuffs are ideal to the entire raid. I mean, you can play DPS, but chances are everyone is going to expect you to be Temptation. They want you to bring that support to the group. You're going to benefit the group more than running DPS, and that's just unfortunate. Hopefully they continue to work on the Warlock down the line, but I have, you know, a strong feeling that it's not going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. We're going to be running Temptation for a while, and that sucks, especially for me personally, because I play a Warlock to play DPS, not support. If I wanted to play support, I would play my DC more than I do. So, voice your opinion, Warlock community. Please, go to Cryptic, go to the message boards. Tell them this is nonsense, you know? If they did this to Temptation and changed the capstone, then they needed to give the DPS more love than what they did. Yes, they changed some things, and yes, it was a step in the right direction, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. I don't want this video to get too ranty. You guys know my opinions on this already. That's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave me a comment below if you have any questions. I'll see you guys in the next video.